All right, it's 7 o'clock. This is Morning Express, and it's time for us to get into State of the Nation. In case you're joining us now, welcome. And I'll quickly reintroduce the guests in the panel that we have this morning. To my immediate left, I have a lawyer, Ambrose Sweda. We also have Honorable Kembe Gitura and Honorable Kipruto Arab Kirwa, basically just to look at some of the issues that we've had as a country. I'll start off with a question that we're asking this morning, and the question is, who are the beneficiaries, who are the biggest losers and beneficiaries, in your opinion, of the Uhuru-Raila handshake? But also, before we get to that, let me just read some of your comments that are coming through. Jeremiah Hagen says the biggest losers are the selfish cut materials. The big winners are the open-minded people. So, well, is that your thinking? Douglas Owino also says losers are those opposed to Raila politically, while gainers are the normal mwananchi and business, since there is peace and business is picking up, the investor confidence. So we'll get into that in just a bit. But let me also just start with asking the panel the same question, and I'll start with you, Honorable Kipruto Arab Kirwa, on whether you think they're losers and gainers of that particular handshake.
Well, possibly losers may be those who disagree with the position the two leaders took on the 9th. But the gainers are the people who strongly believe that the sovereign nation of Kenya deserves stability. Because what happens is that when sovereignty is challenged because of what is believed as lack of legitimacy, the very foundation of our nation is shaken. And this therefore means even the business, even the interaction among individuals was going to be hampered by the tension that had been created by a long period of electioneering. Secondly, there are those individuals who wanted to survive in an atmosphere of confusion and therefore hold the president ransom to supporting individuals other than what Kenyans believe in. And therefore, the president must have been freed by the presence of another force that is in excess of the normal force that he had within the purview of his presidency. Third, and very important, is that this issue of corruption would not have made a lot of strides if the president was going to be told, if you do this, we are going to whittle down your support or reduce whatever you perceive to be your area of influence. Therefore, the president was given not only total legitimacy, but also support to actualize the agenda that he has for the nation of Kenya.
All right, let me come to you, Ambrose Sweda. And unfortunately, sometimes politically speaking, we look at gains and losses just from a political plane. Whereas, as per the Constitution, the biggest benefactor should be Wanjiku. Yes. Do you think Wanjiku is the biggest beneficiary of the handshake and the peace that we feel right now?
I think the biggest beneficiary is basically, when you say the country, then you're talking about Wanjiku. The divide between the NASA, read Honorable Raila supporters, and the Jubilee, after the last year's election was so wide that it was almost difficult for the Kikuyu nation to go and do business in Kisumu, the Kalenjin nation to go and do business in Kisumu, or they'll do business during the day and they leave. It was so bad. Some of us who support President Uhuru, you would have to walk around either with a bodyguard or armed, and you check your path. And you don't just walk anyhow because you are an Uhuru man and you are a betrayer and you are all these things.
Rather, you are viewed as a betrayer.
Yes, and I know, even personal as a friend, there are people that would never want me, some relatives, they never want me to visit them. Or they want to talk to you, but they want to talk to you at night. They want the goodies from Uhuru, but they want it at night. They want it during the day. During the day, they say he's betraying us. So immediately the handshake came. There was a thawing down of tensions, and people started looking at themselves as Kenyans. And some of us have realized, even now, people say, Kumbe, you are very wise. Canaan was just Jubilee and the handshake. So the Wanjiku has gained. And that is why the two of them, the president and Honorable Raila, have gained more. Why? President Uhuru risked leaving a country divided. That is the worst legacy he would have left. So it gets unity. Honorable Raila comes out as a nationalist who can come down for the sake of Kenya. And I think he has become more popular than he was before the handshake. So all this you'll find Wanjiku has gained. Internationally, our enemies cannot say there are tensions in Kenya, please don't go there, don't go to Nyanza, don't go to Lake Victoria, all these things. So the gains are for Wanjiku. There will be a few people who would be crying here and there because you don't have porojo to go and take to President Uhuru because you have to go there with Raila's name and say, hey. And then they also don't have porojo to take to Honorable Raila because you go there with Uhuru's name, this Kikuyu's nini. I think it is the best thing that happened at that time.
For the sake of Kenya. All right, let me come to you, Honorable Kembi Gitura. And there are certain issues that have not been dealt with, and hopefully they're going to be dealt with as we go along. And this, some view after the handshake that may be left out. For instance, we have the issue of inclusivity, which is one of the biggest drivers of the opposition at that time, that there was iniquity in terms of leadership. Do you feel that this is now finally being addressed?
Our legal system, on our electoral system, has and is on a winner-take-it-all. That's what we have at the moment. And if I go back a little to that question of the losers and gainers, my view has been that the nation is what has benefited. The people of Kenya, the Wanjiku that you mentioned. The losers are those people who want to perpetuate that, impunity. People who want to continue with business as usual, the status quo people who want to drive in confusion, But if you see what's happening now, like on matters corruption, for instance, and this is a major issue. The things we are seeing now, we would not have seen them before. I was so happy last night when I saw in the news that finally, the first envelope of Declaration of Wealth is being opened through the authority of the Privileges Committee of Parliament. It hasn't happened. Now, when this envelope is taken, these two envelopes, I think there are two, for the chairman, Mr. Swazuri, and his deputy, right. When they are taken to ACC, and I'm not saying they have committed any crime, any offense, when they are taken there and opened, some of these things would not have happened, because previously. For the very simple reason that corruption has been ethnicized, tribalized. I mean, if it was whether, it's our people are being finished. If it's Kembi, it's our people are being finished. Today, that is going to become something of the past, and people are not going to be talking about it. And I'm hoping and praying that this ethnicization of corruption is going to end, and that the handshake is going to help that, because the thing about the handshake is that we are finding that more and more we are talking as Kenyans. We are talking as one people. The small clique that is unhappy with the handshake is most likely because they are losing because of that handshake.
Because of that handshake.
And how are they losing? Because they cannot now go back to the tribal cocoons and say, we are being finished.
And you can't say it's our people. And talking about some of the things that would not have happened. Currently, we have the first, and one of the issues that has bedeviled this country is corruption, like you've rightly mentioned. And we have the first sitting governor basically spending a night or two in the coolers as a guest of the state. And this is Sospita Ojamong, the governor the governor who basically was arrested. But I'd like us to listen to what he had to say and possibly hear from you, Honorable Kipruto, whether this is the direction that you expect us to take and possibly even gain momentum. But let's first of all listen into what he had to say.
Hiyo ni maneno ya uongo. Tulikuwa tunafanya Madam Ri biashara akiwa amefungua account katika Family Bank Kisumu. Na tulimlipa mara mbili, milioni 4 mara ya kwanza, milioni nyingine mara ya pili. Na akatuandikia report ya feasibility study ya solid waste management Busia. Pia akawakota takataka Busia County.
There we have the governor, and maybe also to get from you, Mheshimiwa, the question of when it's reached a point where we have a governor has been arrested with accusations of corruption, should we also get, increase the threshold to a point where he should also be honorable enough to say, for the period of time that the investigations are going on, I'll step aside?
Well, that will be individual's decision, because the question of integrity is in Chapter 6, and I think lawyers can explain better. But as to when you should say I should step aside is really up to the individual to say, okay, it is time that I gave the public, I removed my face from the public for purposes of ensuring that I do not look funny until the case is dispensed with. But on the issue of corruption, yes, it's a step. But we hope that DPP has gotten enough information, and it is not a question of procedure, because at times people can decide to steal, or others may decide to do it in a smart way, such that at the end of the day, lots of money has been lost, but people did it in a way that is so smart. Because I do not think a governor would spend a lot of time planning to steal 8 million. It must have been something, well, I don't want to prejudice the issue in court, but I do hope that somebody who will be found culpable of that particular crime will be punished as a way of showing the rest of Kenyans that corruption is something that we must run away from.
All right. Honorable Kembe Gitura, should we raise the threshold? And I mean, I'm reminded of one British leader who basically resigned by virtue of the fact that he was late for a meeting and he felt he has let down the people. Now, by the time somebody is getting to be accused, not that they're guilty, but wouldn't it be an honorable thing just to say, for the sake of clarity, for the sake of showing that I'm completely innocent, I will step aside, and when I'm vindicated, you're still an office bearer?
I don't think so, actually, because the basis of our law assumes that you're innocent until you're proved guilty. And Governor Sospita Ojamong will have his day in court, and he'll say what he has to say, and the evidence will be brought for and against him. And I think it will create lots of chaos if everybody resigned, because there's a difference. There's a difference, for instance, your cabinet secretary, yeah, because maybe then you'll be forced to step aside. But in public office like the one for Sospita Ojamong, the governor, I do not see any reason why he should step aside, because he's been charged. Because then it will make nonsense of the fact that you are deemed innocent until you're proved guilty.
And you don't have any concerns of interference possibly with the investigation? Because one of the things that the prosecutor has put before the judge is the fact that for him to be given bail may interfere with the case.
That is always said. Whether and I know that is the prosecutor will always say that. And it is possible that people may interfere with the witnesses. That is also possible when they're given bail. It's up to the prosecutor and to the police to ensure that doesn't happen. And if it happens, there are always consequences. Human liberty is very important. You assume that it's assumed that you're innocent all the time until you're proved guilty. Then after that moment, they deal with you like the criminal that you are. But there are many things that happen in this country. Like, you find people going to court to get what they call anticipatory bail. Personally, I find it ridiculous as a lawyer, because you cannot go and say that I fear I'll be arrested. Because you must be arrested if there's a reason for you to be arrested. And getting anticipatory bail is defeating the cause of justice, in my view. But once you're arrested, it's up to you. Have that chance to prove you are innocent. So Sospita Ojamong, the governor for Busia, is saying it is lies, it is politics. Let him have his day in court. Let him prove that. If he does, then he'll be set free.
All right, Ambrose Weda.
I think being charged is fairly normal, and stepping aside for elected leaders is not there. And going from the history of this country, if people were to be stepping aside, it would be used politically. There were times when people would be arrested from parliament and charged. So it would be a political tool. Let's get something, let's corner Gitonga here. Then once we charge him, he's out. We charge so and so, so and so. So let it be.
Let him have his day in court.
Yes. And the defense is trying to let him give it in court. The prosecution also saying that, he will interfere with witnesses. Corruption offenses are basically document-oriented. And before you charge somebody, you have collected all those things, looked at them, and then you say, hapa, here, there was some capocho. So going again to court and say we'll interfere with witnesses and so on and so forth, I think that is basically because they are also a team that wants you to sleep inside. That's why police would wait and arrest you on Friday, so that you are there on Saturday, Sunday. They will not arrest you on Monday or Tuesday. If we leave this gerrymandering so that when we are passing corruption, we get the facts and we tell you, please, we are going to charge you with this offense, these are the documents. If you have any answer, give it to us. It will be good fight in this country. But the fact that Ojamong is in court, and most governors, when they came into office, they had no clue. So they were kings. The roads would be cleared for them, and there'll be hordes of policemen following them. So they became small gods, and they made mistakes. Quite a number of them, if were followed, they would actually be charged. But the fact that Jamong has been arrested and is a governor is very good for the nation, in the sense that those of us who are yet to steal fear.
Anticipatory again on stealing. Let me come to you, Honorable Kipruto Arap Kiro. The other question that has been raised as a result of what is happening is the role of the opposition and the fact that the opposition apparently is somewhat silent. Your thoughts on that, given that you're a member of NASA?
Well, first of all, I think we are confident that what the president is doing the right thing. Talking from the opposition, I do appreciate the role he has played. What we just need to do is to assist him to further define to many Kenyans that corruption is taking away what belongs to all of us without our consent. Because many Kenyans are not able to divorce the affairs of the state and the fact that the state has some ownership on our behalf. It is just a trustee, a custodian of what belongs to us for the period that they are in power. And therefore, lack of clear delineation between what belongs to us and what belongs to an individual has been the major problem. Secondly, I think the rollout program that the president has done through what is happening now is good enough for the opposition, because we already realize that already there is opposition within Jubilee. And I just wanted to remind those who are crying wolf in Jubilee of Proverbs 28:1, that those who run without being chased are the wicked.
The guilty.
The guilty.
When they're not pursued.
Yes, and also in the same chapter 28, verse 1, it continues to say, when there is rebellion within the country, there are many rulers, and it will take a ruler who is knowledgeable and also understanding to bring order. And I think President Uhuru is such a leader. We need to support him, and we give him total prayer so that he succeeds in this. Because I feel President Uhuru should realize that presidency has term limit. But if he can elevate himself to the leader of Kenya, that has no term limit. And he will have acquitted himself as somebody who made a difference in the lives of Kenyans.
Now that you brought in scripture, there is also a man of the cloth, as he is known, and that's Canon Karanja, who had something to say regarding the handshake and possibly what political capital that it may have. So I'd like to hear what your comments are on that. But let's listen into Canon Karanja.
There are a few dangers on the way, because the handshake appears to completely stand in the way of Ruto. So if you love Ruto that much, reinterpret the handshake and explore keenly what are its total ramifications. Raila is re-engineering himself through the handshake, and it is very likely he is likely through it to cause major havoc on Ruto's design and scheme.
And Honorable Kembi Gitura, from Canon Karanja, is that something you expected from his quarters, but also just to weigh in on what he has to say there regarding Raila reinventing himself?
No, tomorrow I'm going to...
First of all, let me tell you my friend here about those who run without being chased. Because you see, if you look at scriptures out of context, it can be very dangerous. Because joggers, the people who jog surely are not being chased. You cannot include them in this benefit. They are not being chased.
Or marathon runners.
Or the road runners. So I think we have to look at all these things in context.
Context.
So you don't condemn people who jog. Canon Karanja, and I have an occasion to talk about what he said here. The statement is made. I don't know, again, whether it is in context or not, whether you have taken it in context, whether that's all he said and what he was up to. Because I find that statement, taken as it is, very unfortunate. Because the church has a very big role to play. And Canon Karanja is an extremely senior person in the NCCK. He is the Secretary General. That's a very, very senior position. And what he says could be taken as a position of the NCCK, because he's the spokesman for NCCK. So every word that comes from his mouth needs to be very calculated. Because when he starts talking about Ruto here and Raila here, and saying what should be done or what should not be done and how it is perceived or interpreted, then maybe he is delving too deeply. And maybe he is misleading. You look at those bishops that is addressing, copiously taking notes of what he is saying. And it will be very dangerous if they go now to their dioceses and then disseminate that and send a message as if it was an NCCK message. And I'm a member of the Anglican Church, for instance, which is a member of the NCCK. So what was the purpose of his statement? When he says that Mzee Moi hates Ruto, where does that come from, for instance? You see? Because it's very dangerous, because I've never heard Mzee Moi talk about Ruto in terms of hatred. There may be political differences. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you're in a position of responsibility, and I hope I'm not repeating myself when I say this, that in the 90s, was it not for the church, or rather the church played a very, very major role in what then came out to be the second liberation. And I remember with great fondness, people like Archbishop David Gitari, Bishop John Okulu, Bishop Alexander Kipsang Arap Muge, Timothy Joya of the PCA, and Reverend John Gatu. People who played a very major role because they were the voices of reason, and they disseminated that to their churches. And therefore people came to start working towards the second liberation with a Christian or a church, and on Muslims too. Remember, there were the Sheikh Balala in Mombasa and others who played an extremely important role, because it was coming from a religious point of view. And Kenyans are generally religious people. It came out very clearly. So if the church is the conscience of the people, every word that comes from a senior clergy, somebody, whether it's in a Muslim, a Christian, it should be very well calculated so that it does not help to cause division. All right.
Ambrose Weda, we'll soon need to wind up. And I'd like us to maybe summarize to get your closing comments, but also more to advise, or your thoughts to Wanjiko on what the meaning of the handshake is. Because when we look at it from a perspective of Raila win, Uhuru, Ruto, then we trivialize possibly the peace that we feel right now. So what should we be looking at as Kenyans?
Thank you. Let me answer by, first of all, dealing with what Canon Karanja has said. Canon Karanja is a man of the cloth, but I think he must have, the Kikuyu in him must have taken over, because the scriptures say all things work together for those who trust in the Lord. If we put the handshake to the Lord and trust that God loves Kenya so much, he lives in Kenya, then it works for our good. If he is seeing, who this one hates who, and so on, so yet he knows. The scriptures say we owe each other nothing but love. So he should know that. And he should be praying for the president, for the deputy president, for Honorable Raila and the country, so that we move. But for the people of Kenya, you must know that the scripture says we owe each other nothing but love. Nobody owes you anything but love. So you get out to work, and to work you need a conducive atmosphere, a good country, peaceful, with a direction, with security, with order. And therefore, if it is President Uhuru and Prime Minister Raila Odinga and the rest creating disorder, it is our responsibility to tell them, stop. We want a conducive atmosphere. So when they work in a way that creates order, peace and tranquility. We thank God, we encourage them, and we continue working. Because when you sleep hungry in your house, Honorable Raila is not sleeping hungry, Honorable Uhuru is not sleeping hungry. When you fight with your wife or your neighbor, those guys are having cappuccino wherever they meet. Honorable Raila is now in India, sent by President Uhuru. You are struggling under a bridge. That's your problem. So the country we want is an atmosphere that allows growth. And that's what we're asking Honorable Raila Odinga and Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta to continue imbuing in this country.
All right, Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa, as you give us your closing comments, what is your message as a member of the opposition to Kenya on those issues that possibly have not been dealt with or need to be dealt with over time? We look at inclusivity, corruption, electoral justice. What is your message to Kenyans?
Well, basically, let us be patient with the handshake between the president and former prime minister, because therein is the issue of us having a reform agenda that will address issues, among others, the political landscape in terms of electoral reforms. Secondly, let us also support the fact that Kenya needs to be better integrated. Since independence, and this is with the risk of repeating myself, we've just lacked national cohesion. We see ourselves as a nation among nations, where we do not see anything common among ourselves. We see ourselves as just bound by the boundary of Kenya, but we look at ourselves as tribes. And this is something that we need to assist the two leaders and other leaders of goodwill for genuine national integration and national cohesion, because that's the only way we can bring the issue of inclusivity. Inclusivity is not bringing everybody to the table. Inclusivity means once you are elected through a democratic process, you become just to each and every society by providing services without saying you voted for us, you did not vote for us. It's not about individuals being in the cabinet. There is not enough positions in the cabinet. There is not enough positions at the top leadership, but there are enough resources for purposes of ensuring each and every Kenyan feels is part and parcel of the nation.
All right, and Kembi Gitura, your closing comments, but as you do that, it's unfortunate that our politics are very tribal, and even when a group of leaders from Mount Kenya, including yourselves, met with Raila, it caused jitters, within Jubilee Party or within some people from Central Province feeling like, is there going to be an alliance between Central and Nyanza? Whereas really, we should be looking at unity as a country. Your message?
We should be looking at unity as a country. Ambrose Wenda, for instance, has talked about the Kikuyu in Canon Karanja. I think that's unfair. He should look at Canon Karanja as Canon Karanja.
As an individual.
As an individual. I don't know, I cannot even understand where he brought in the Kikuyu name. I think it was unnecessary. We need to take this nation very, very seriously. We need to end corruption. The fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta reached out to Raila Odinga embodies very well the statement that nobody is greater than the nation. Not the president, not the leader of the opposition. The fact that president reached out to Raila, in my view, is a sign of greatness. He came to a moment when he realized, listen, it's about our country we are talking. We are polarized as a nation, and Raila, I hear them calling each other brother, my older brother, my younger brother. Raila is a person I know very well. That's Uhuru's thinking. And he reached out to him. For me, that should be supported. If this country is to be, we are still a very young nation. At 53 or whatever number we are now as a nation. We are still very young, a very young democracy. So are we going to grow it? If we are going to, then the line that President Uhuru Kenyatta has taken with Right Honorable Raila Odinga to help steer this nation is very important. It's not a question of alliance of Central Kenya and Nyanza, Luo Nyanza. No. Politics is about alliances, yes. But first and foremost, we must build a cohesive nation. Once we are cohesive, once we are a wealthy nation, once we can speak with one voice and 30% of our GDP stops going to corruption cartels like it is doing currently, then we'll be able to find that tribe really has no place in our nation. That we can go on as a people, as a nation, and we can create wealth and happiness and that what Kipruto Kirwa has called cohesion. In my view, that is what we need to be looking at the moment. And that is why The handshake between the president and Raila Odinga should be applauded by every Kenyan of goodwill and supported by every Kenyan of goodwill. Not politicking about it, not tribalizing it, not trying to make it a regional kind of thing.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to wind up there because of time. Thank you very much, Honorable Kembi Gitura. We also have Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa and Ambrose Weda. That's the State of the Nation. It brings us to 7:30 right here on Morning Express. For now, we're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. When we come back, we'll be talking to Nairobi Woman Representative Esther Muthoni Passaris, and we'll be looking at, her tenure so far. And if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to her, feel free to send them through right away. We'll see whether we can engage with her on those questions. So for now, we take a short break. When we come back, it's time for us to have our person of interest.